clock is ticking. Now we're just waiting for this. There we go. That's the business right there. All right. I think everything is working. I'm getting some hey there's and hellos, so that's good. Count them, 2 live streams this weekend. I did a live stream yesterday for the Uncle Adam's Irregulars, who are the third tier Patreon supporters. I do one a month for them, and that one worked first try, and I didn't have to, start over and make a whole new link and go through all that rigmarole. And here we are again. Same deal. Had first try. So either YouTube has fixed everything. Hey, and Matthew is here as well. Moderator Matt. It's a wonderful time to be alive, and I've got coffee. So in my constellation mug. So I hope everyone's having a lovely Sunday wherever you are, unless it's already Monday, which in some places I'm sure it is. We've got Sweden, Northern Germany. Let me see, what else have we got? Canton, Illinois. What else have we got? Australia. It's probably Monday, almost there, I would assume. Here, it is a lovely sunny day. Not super duper warm. It's going to be probably in the high 50s, maybe hitting as high as 60, 62 today, Fahrenheit. Yesterday was a bit warmer, and it was nice and dry and sunny, so I went outside and I primed a whole bunch of terrain. If you saw on Facebook or Instagram, I posted some pictures. I primed a bunch of terrain, which I'm going to be using for Shadow War Armageddon, and I also primed my last 2 Imperial Guardsmen for my Imperial Guard Shadow War warband. I will be doing a quick and easy paint tutorial about how to paint quick and easy Imperial Guard very soon, because I want to get them painted so I can start using them in Shadow War. So I had to get that part finished, but that'll be coming up real soon. The rest of the terrain turned out pretty nice, and I'm going to start doing the actual painting pretty soon. Netherlands, Japan, Italy, New York City, Pittsburgh, Netherlands, Finland. It's China. That's pretty cool. It's 10 p.m., almost Monday there. Denmark. What else have we got? It's lovely and warm in the UK. Belgium. There we go. Excellent. Everything's working out well. I hope you guys are having a good time, and I hope you guys are building or painting or whatever, or just relaxing. I saw someone mention ASMR. I get people from time to time tell me that I should do ASMR videos. I don't really know anything about them. I understand vaguely what the concept is. I should look into it, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the thing that... I don't know. We'll see. I've had plenty of people tell me I should do audiobooks and voiceover, and I did voiceover for moderator Matt for his Kickstarter for Wreckage, and it's hard. Like, just me sitting here talking, or me talking in front of the camera when I'm doing my normal videos, and once a week or whatever. For me, that's easier. I'm just coming up with it on the top of my head. But when reading somebody else's words, it just becomes a bit more difficult. So I would have to practice more, I think. So yeah, definitely. Oh, by the way, congratulations. Everyone should congratulate moderator Matt for their successful Kickstarter. Wreckage, Hyacinth Games, he and his business partner Anton had a successful Kickstarter for the new vehicles models for Wreckage, post-apocalyptic game. So I'm going to be receiving, because I pledged at the $75 level, I'm going to be getting 3 super cool modular post-apocalyptic vehicles that I can build however I want and put together and then paint and all that stuff. And so yeah, it just ended earlier this past week, I believe, and it went well, almost $12,000, and their goal was, I think, 10. So good for Matt, and No, Matt, the script did not suck. It was a good script. I just am not good at reading scripts yet, so I'm working on it. But yeah, so anyway, congratulations to moderator Matt and the Wreckage Hyacinth Games crew for their successful Kickstarter. Yeah, it was cool. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? Las Vegas. We got some congrats for Matt. Uncle Adam's voice is the best radio voice. I've heard people who've got better voices. Don't. Let's see here. What else? Abnormal says, "Oh wow, this is still live. It actually just started about 5 minutes ago. Yeah, about 5 minutes ago. So you've just caught the beginning there. Where the heck did it go? I already scrolled by. Abnormal. There you go. Right there. Troy says, I have my Space Marine almost together and plan to prime today. Yeah, like normally, if I'm going to do normal models, I generally just prime them with my airbrush down in the basement because I live in Wisconsin where half the year you really can't prime outside. And it's just really, it's nicer to sometimes prime with an airbrush because you waste less paint and it's just easier. And you can do like one guy. I feel weird, just like yesterday I sprayed just 2 of those Imperial Guardsmen and primed them that color, and doing it with a rattle can felt weird to me because it's just 2 guys and you're hitting them with this big rattle can. But it was because all the rest of the guys in that warband had already been primed with that same rattle can. So I'm like, well, I want everything to match. So that's the only reason that I had done it that way. Normally, I prime models with an airbrush. Now, terrain, that's a different story because it's huge. Sometimes I still, if it's winter and I'm building some terrain, I'm going to have to prime it indoors. But I've been using lately this stuff called Rust-Oleum Filler Primer, which Austin from Death Ray Designs turned me on to. Death Ray Designs makes a lot of really cool MDF buildings and stuff like that. I did a video a while back about MDF buildings, and I kind of featured some of Austin's cool post-apocalyptic buildings from there. And in that video, well, actually, while I was making the video, I was in the process of producing the video, I contacted Austin to find out what's the best primer to put on these MDF buildings, because MDF will just soak up paint. And he said, Rust-Oleum Filler Primer is his go-to. It's the best stuff. So, I'm finding even on plastic, it gives it a nice texture. So when you go back and dry brush it, it just looks the way I want it to look. So that's why I've been using it. Six Gunner asks, Adam, did you build the terrain for Shadow War Armageddon, which you primed yesterday, or did you buy them? The stuff that I had in that picture yesterday, actually, the majority of it is all Games Workshop City Death, or Cities of Death, whatever, kits. Basilicum, Administratum, Manufactorum, all these crazy pseudo-Latin names. And they're all, so yeah, I had built several of them years and years ago, and I built a couple others that I found in the basement that I hadn't built yet, but I'm using those for my Shadow War stuff. There was also a couple of pieces in that picture that are actually old school armor cast resin pieces, and those turned out really nicely too. Last night, when those pieces that you saw in the picture were still sitting in the garage outgassing, getting the the vapors from the rattle can to leave so they don't stink so bad. I like to keep them outside overnight in the garage to do that. While I was doing that last night, I was actually building the real terrain that comes with Shadow War and listening to an audiobook. But that stuff is, it's very modular, but they kind of show you how to build it, and I don't know, like I wish I had a second set so I could get kind of crazy with it and do some weird stuff. But right now I'm kind of just following the instructions. It's kind of like back in the day when you used to get like a set of Legos, and the first time you would build them, like they followed the instructions and build it and go, oh look, I made a little police station or whatever. And then after that you're like, all right, now I'm going to make something completely different. The problem is you've glued this stuff together and now you can't like go back and tweak it. So yeah. Abnormal says, well, your post on Facebook states Sunday morning, and it's afternoon, but I would not be like, well, it's Sunday morning where I am. I'm in the Midwest of America. So, yeah, it is, your time zone may vary, but when I say Sunday morning, I mean Sunday morning by me, whereas by you, it may be who knows what time or even day. So, yeah. Rob Phillipson says, sadly, I can't be painting at the moment as my brother has covered my desk in his new Sylvaneth stuff. That Sylvaneth stuff is pretty cool. I got an opponent that I play Age of Sigmar with, and he goes pretty heavy into Sylvaneth, and it's fun. It's cool looking stuff. He's painted it very well, and he's a newer painter, but it looks really nice. he's really kind of leapt into it over the last year or so, and now he's got himself an airbrush and he's doing stuff, and it's good looking stuff. If you go back to my Instagram, there were pictures of me fighting against a Sylvaneth army probably sometime early this year or late 2016. That's my friend Jason, and he's doing good work. Saber XT says they still do Cities of Death. I thought they stopped that ages ago. The Cities of Death terrain is still available on the website. Like all those manufactorums, basilicums, all that junk. It's all on there. I mean, right now, and they're still pretty reasonably priced. I don't know if stores can still get them. I don't know if they're web exclusive. I don't think they are. But yeah, it works out. It's neat terrain. It's very modular. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. So yeah. Let's see here. What else have we got? So 8th edition is going to be great. Heading down to Nottingham to get some Forge World Alpha Legion naughtiness. Posting a pic of my Legionnaires into the Facebook group as we speak. Oh, I appreciate it. Well, that's good to see. I have to admit, I am... What's the word I'm looking for? I am kind of jealous to some degree. I would love to go to Nottingham and check out Warhammer World, and maybe someday my wife and I will do so. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I apologize here. I'm just fixing something real quick on my phone so it doesn't make a bunch of noise. There we go. But yeah, I would definitely like to stop by there and take a look. I've noticed, I've watched Andy 2D6, his channel. He and Remington Steele from the Andy and Rem show on the Andy 2D6 channel, they've gone down and done battle reports at Warhammer World. And for some reason, which I don't understand, they don't allow you to take video there, but you can take pictures. So they've been doing battle reports that have just been photos, and then he basically puts the photos on the screen and kind of talks over them later on, which is interesting. But I don't know why you can't do video. That's kind of a bummer. So anyway, long story short is someday I hope to get there, and good luck going down there and getting your Forge World stuff for your Alpha Legion. Intense Pickle asks, is that a liquor cabinet behind you? Pass that around. Well, yes, and also glassware, but yeah. I don't really know that I could pass it through the thing, and I don't know that any of you are of legal age in your countries of origin, so, I probably can't do that. What else have we got? Hey, Uncle Adam. Hey, everyone. Greetings from Austria. Well, greetings. Sam Hinchy says, really thought that the stream had started because I'm not seeing anything. I assure you, Sam, that it has started. There's a lot of, it's been going for about 12 minutes, according to our friends over at YouTube. James Francis asks, do you think that Dark Elves for Age of Sigmar will get new models and a new book? Dark Elves for Age of Sigmar. I don't know. That's a good question. Because they've, they still have the High Elves and the Wood Elves and all that stuff, but they've really gone kind of heavy into Sylvaneth. I don't know. It's a good question. I think down the road, maybe. I don't know, and I haven't been paying close enough attention to see if they've been picking up and going, okay, well, we're going to do an order thing, and then a destruction thing, and then a death thing, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if they've been trying to hit all the different factions and be equal and fair. Obviously, there's been plenty of releases for our friends, the Stormcast Eternals. There's a lot of that. But, I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. They have announced and they've started to show off new death models, but not for Age of Sigmar. They're for Shadespire when it comes out later this year. But they look really cool. I mean, I love skeletons. And I was interested in Shadespire, but now that they're making a skeleton faction, I'm like, well, yeah, okay, cool. So, yeah, that'll be very interesting. So maybe they will, I don't know, maybe they'll re-release other armies with, they're re-releasing the normal Skeleton Warriors just in a new box. So they've now got the new Age of Sigmar box, but it's the same sculpts. So it's not a big deal that way. But I don't know, maybe they'll be doing more sculpts and things like that down the road. It kind of depends, I think. Let's see here. What else have we got? Hey, 12 Neef. I really enjoyed going to Warhammer World last year. Fully recommend it for Wargamers. Yeah, I think that would be fun. I guess I have to get like a, what do you call that? A passport? Probably, one of those. What else have we got here? Uncle Adam, I just want to say hi from Tokyo. Love your channel. Well, hello from Tokyo. Real scale, real scale Marines. Are you going to talk about it? Real scale Marine. I don't really know much about them. There's a lot of talk about people trying to make the... I've heard that they're looking at making newer Space Marines that are a good deal larger than the current Space Marines, which... Okay, so in the stories, if you've read the books and things like that, Space Marines, even when they're not in their armor, are supposed to be at least like 7 feet tall or bigger. When they're in their armor, they can be as big as 8 feet tall, from what I understand. So putting a model of a Space Marine next to a model of an Imperial Guardsman, they should not be nearly the same height. But that's kind of a scale issue due to the fact that just, the playing of the game, if you made everything completely perfectly scaled, it would be sometimes difficult. Look at games like X-Wing. X-Wing is better than the Star Trek Attack Wing game, where you have these huge capital ships next to smaller runabouts and they're nearly the same size. And I get why they're doing it, but at least in X-Wing, they're scaling ships. Like you've got a Tantive 4 and it's 18 inches long or 16 inches or whatever, and then you've got something like an X-Wing that's a good deal smaller. And so they're at least attempting it there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. If it's one of those deals where they've decided just to start scaling up Space Marines a whole bunch and they start to kind of like slowly I don't know, that'd be a tough Band-Aid to tear off, you know what I mean? Just make it like, well, now TAC Marines, if a box of TAC Marines costs $80 because they're all, 1.5 times the size of a normal Imperial Guardsman. I don't know if they'll go that way. They may start going that way with special Marines that they make up. I don't know. It's a good question. Do you prefer to paint your miniatures before they are completely assembled? It depends on the model, and it depends on what I'm trying to do. If I'm just trying to get stuff done, if I was, let's say, Space Marines are a good example because they always hold that bolter in front of their chest. If I'm just running through a bunch of troops, I have a tendency to put them all completely together, texture the bases, then start priming and painting. And the fact that I can't paint the little eagle on the guy's chest because the bolter is in the way doesn't bother me because the bolter's in the way. You can barely see it. If it was like a really fancy guy, or if I was trying to paint that Space Marine for some reason for a display project, then I would paint that gun separately and glue it on later. That being said, my Age of Sigmar Chaos Warriors, I did keep their shields off when I painted them, and then I painted the shields separately, and then I put them all back together at the end. But it was only because they were really big. Like, the shields were humongous, and it was very easy to quickly put it on, later, because it wasn't a difficult thing to line up. It's just a little ball that goes into a socket on their arm, and it's just a real quick and easy glue job at the very end. So for those, you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Is it easier to do it? Is it something that you're really concerned about? Because this is a really, like, if this guy was an HQ unit and you wanted him to look really nice, but he still had that gun in front, I'd leave the gun off, paint the underside. But if it's just regular, rank and file troops, then I don't generally do that. Excuse me. Durelius, I'm never going to pronounce that right, I'm sorry. Some people are already butthurt over 8th edition rumors. This is to be expected. Obviously, any kind of change, people hate change. Most people, almost all people hate change. The thing is that change, as I've said this a whole bunch of times before, and I did not come up with it, change is the only constant. There's no such thing as no change. Everything changes. And we as people, for whatever reason, just we're not a fan of that. I think that Games Workshop is really going to have the benefit over about 2 years ago, looking at what they did with the transition from Fantasy to Age of Sigmar, and I think that they're going to not make those same mistakes. Age of Sigmar was a good thing overall. The way the transition was handled was rough. And we can already see that they've decided at this point to make some real steps towards fixing that PR problem at the very least, with the frequently asked questions that they posted yesterday. So yesterday, for those of you that haven't been paying attention, hang on a second. Okay, so yesterday, Games Workshop announced on their website that 8th edition, the new edition of Warhammer 40,000, was going to be released, which is awesome. Okay, great. Now, in the past, Games Workshop would announce something a week before it happened. And that was the way it works. That's not the way that this is working this year. They announced it, said, new edition of 40k is on its way, and here's a bunch of information about it, which also has never happened before. Not only did they do that, they were also like, oh, by the way, here's a frequently asked questions that you can go and look at. And it's a 3-page PDF that answers questions about what's going to happen. Now, it doesn't answer all of them, but it answers a bunch. Now, the fact that it's a frequently asked questions, when it just happened, like, people haven't asked those questions yet, but they know what questions people are going to ask. If you get the chance, go to the Games Workshop website and check it out. It's really an interesting read, and it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of stuff. Very first question here, I'm just looking at it. Is my army still valid? Yes, it certainly is. You will still be able to use your army in the new edition of Warhammer 40,000. All current armies will be supported with the new rules. Next one, well, can I still use all my models? Same stuff. Even Forge World models. Yes, even all of your Warhammer 40,000 Forge World models. Wait, did you guys blow up the universe? Nope. So, that kind of stuff. How can I get the rules? We're going to make it easier than ever for you to get your hands on the rules and start playing. The core rules for the game will be free. Let that sink in a little bit. The core rules for Warhammer 40,000 will be free. I'm assuming a download. They're not going to mail you a book. And you'll have several options on how to get your hands on the full rule book. Watch this space for more. Now, this is a thing that other manufacturers have been doing for quite some time. And as I've said before, it's partially because they have to. The reason that Games Workshop in the past has never really made the rulebook free or a free download is because, being the biggest 800-pound gorilla in the industry, they didn't have to. But the smaller companies that have been doing this for quite some time have really, to some degree, they've changed the mindset of the people playing the game. You want to play Dark Age, you want to play Wrath of Kings, you want to play Infinity, Malifaux. You can get a free download of the rules for all those. If you want to, you can also buy the hard copy for all of those, because some people just really like the hard copy. It's almost like back in the day, in the earlier days of video games, like on the PC in the 90s, they had something called shareware, where basically you could get a copy of the game, but it was like maybe only the first level, and then you could try it out and go, oh, this is a cool game, I like this game, and now you're more likely to buy it. This is the same type of deal. People are going to want to know what the rules are like, and with it being such a big change, a big rip-off of the Band-Aid, people are going to go, well, I'm not going to just go out and buy the book just to find out what the rules are like. That's not cool. And, there'll be a lot of information on the internet about it, but a lot of it will be biased, or a lot of it will be whatever, personal, ideas and things like that. So their thought is, I'm assuming, is they're like, we'll just give the core rules away for free. You can go download it, check it out, and go, oh, that's cool. I'm interested in that. That's neat. And then, maybe you buy a full book or whatever. It's basically stuff that they're learning from Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar is the same way. So I think it's pretty smart. Have you dumbed down 40k? Not at all. We've made it easier for new people to enter and to get grips with the basics. At the same time, we've made sure you can add as much depth and complexity as you like. There's some fantastic new gameplay elements coming. What we've done is re-examine every aspect of the game and made plenty of improvements, many based on the gaming community's feedback and suggestions. If you play today, this game is recognizably still Warhammer 40,000. So that's interesting. I think that that's going to be, I think that they're going to maybe simplify it a little bit, but they've also added things. They've added in, like they've already said at Adepticon, they were adding the movement stat back in, and they're changing armor saves and the way they work. This is really the thing that surprises me here. What happens to my codexes? The rules in our current range of Warhammer 40k codexes aren't compatible with the new edition of Warhammer 40k. These books will be going off sale very soon. If you do want to pick any up, now's the time, as all the great hobby content and background information will be as valid as ever. So they're actually going to get rid of the codexes. It's going to happen where codexes will no longer be where you get the rules for each of your armies. So I was surprised by that. I did not think they were going to rip off that Band-Aid, but they did. They're also going to be doing the 3 ways to play like you do with Age of Sigmar, where you've got your open narrative and matched play, which is basically points. Now, that didn't come around in Age of Sigmar until about a year and a half later, when they released the General's Handbook. they're going to do that right off the bat with this new rule set because they learned, let's not just throw it out there with no points and have everybody, complain and freak out about it for a year and a half before we actually drop points. So that was one of those things I think that they learned from the issues that they had with Age of Sigmar, definitely. One of my favorite questions here is right towards the end. Why should I trust you? And the answer is, come on, this is the New Games Workshop, TM, which I think is a lot of fun. I love to see the fact that they are getting their own, they're getting kind of a sense of humor back, you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that they had lost track of for quite some time. So, thank you very much, dear. Oh my goodness, I've got more coffee. So yeah, I think it's very interesting to see how that's going to turn out and how, they've been playing with their own kind of sense of humor and making that kind of stuff happen, and they're answering questions and they're listening to the community and all that kind of stuff. So, absolutely. All right, so I've been talking for a bit. Normally I do that a little bit later on, but I kind of got onto a tear there, and so I hope that you guys have enjoyed that stuff, and I've got more questions to ask. Eric Just says, what I basically want for 8th edition is for every army to be able to beat the other with proper generalship. Yeah, I think that's what most people want. And I think that them going through and redoing, like basically the codex is going away. The way it worked with the transfer from Fantasy to Age of Sigmar is that with Fantasy to Age of Sigmar, the stat lines completely changed. And I don't just mean like the numerical values changed. The stat line for Fantasy was very much like the stat line for 40k, where it was, you had, weapon skill, ballistic skill, toughness, strength, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case with Age of Sigmar now. Now it is, to hit, to wound, how much damage it does, rend, and that, that kind of stuff. So it was a very different change. I don't think they're going to make that big of a change. They're obviously adding movement and they're changing the way that armor works. And I'm sure that they're changing with bravery, because the bravery statistic, and again, bravery is something for Age of Sigmar, but they're going to be using something like that in new 8th edition, which they also announced at Adepticon. So there's going to be almost like a battle shock phase. So instead of the entire group deciding, well, we're all going to run off, instead it's going to be like, well, 3 of us are going to run off, that kind of a thing, which is interesting. And I think it's a better system to some degree too. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what they'll do with the stat lines, but they will be very different. I don't know that the stats themselves will change. The categories of stats, I think you'll still have toughness, you'll have strength and things like that. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I have a suspicion they've gone through and changed the numbers a lot, and hopefully they will make the armies more balanced. Because I know a lot of people say that, well, the Eldar are overpowered and Tau are overpowered and all that kind of stuff, so we'll see how it goes. The thing that's interesting about Age of Sigmar that I do enjoy is that for the most part, things are quite balanced, because to some degree kind of everything's overpowered, and when everything's overpowered, nothing is overpowered, you know what I mean? Like everything is totally crackers, and but it works out well. So VJ Morph says, hey Adam, my katana brushes arrived yesterday. Oh, I missed it. So you got some katana brushes from Games and Gears. That's cool. They're very interesting for, like I said, painting tiny little details, eyes, teeth. I'm not good at freehand, but I've been also told that they're good for details in freehand, so good luck with those. Lord 17C says, I was just getting back into this game, might have to wait for 8th to come out before I continue to buy models. Well, the frequently asked questions tells you that you should buy models now, and then in preparation. But I understand what you're saying, Lord 17C. It is definitely something where I could see you having a sit and wait kind of situation. For me personally, I was thinking about this earlier. For me personally, I don't see myself jumping back into 40k. I may give it a try with the Chaos stuff that I've already got. If I can build... So, the way that Age of Sigmar works is that, and a lot of people in this area, we like to play 1,000-point games. And for my Chaos Nurgle army, 1,000 points is about 25 models, roughly. If you were a death army with lots of skeletons, it would be far higher than that, obviously. But 1,000 points is a nice little game. It's not as big as a 1,500 point game in what we currently think of, Warhammer 40,000, but it is definitely a nice playable size. It's not nearly as small as Shadow War either, which is max generally 10 to 20 depending on your faction. So I could see maybe playing some games with the Chaos stuff I already have painted, and that's fine. But I don't see myself, at least not right away, going, oh yeah, I'm going to get back into it heavy and start painting all this stuff. So, I'm not sure. Right now, I think my slightly larger army game is going to be still Age of Sigmar, and my smaller warband game is going to be Shadow War Armageddon, which I'm super excited about. I was painting, like I said, I was priming terrain for that yesterday. I've got a Chaos Warband totally done, basically using my old 40k stuff and making some additions. I put in some more cultists and things like that, painted those guys up a couple weeks ago. And what else? So then I've got a Imperial Guard army that I'm working on, or Warband that I'm working on. I've got orcs. A friend of mine gave me orcs a long time ago that were painted. And so I've got those. They're not super optimized, but they're still a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about Shadow War is just the fact that it's like when you go to a restaurant and you just order appetizers because you want to try a bunch of different stuff. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. When you go to... Age of Sigmar has become to me like when you go to a restaurant and you order 3 small entrees and then you've realized you've ordered too much food. Like I have technically 3 small armies for Age of Sigmar. I have my Chaos Nurgle, I have my Death Army, and sitting all basically in the box, I have Stormcast, because I'm eventually going to put those guys together and paint them and stuff like that. Actually, just a couple, like last week, I picked up, this is the Lord Aquilor, because he's just a great looking model. I don't know if you can see him very well here. The other mounted units that they've had in the past have been on those weird dragony kind of guys, and I don't like the look of those guys, but this crazy griffin with the big bird feet and the lion feet and the big bird head, just awesome. Just an amazing model. I can't wait to paint him. Actually, when I was at Adepticon, I don't know if you can see this here. So, see here, kind of on his haunches, he's got like, I don't know, some sort of texture painted on there. It's not focusing properly. When I was at Adepticon, I found a company that was selling stencils for airbrushing, and they have like a leopard print stencil. So I'm going to use that sort of just real subtle on his haunches to kind of give him like a speckly, kind of almost like a palomino sort of a look on the back. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But the thing is it because the back half of the guy is like technically a cat, the leopard kind of print will work out really well. So yeah, that kind of stuff I'm really interested in doing. Jack Rowley says, why buy models now if we don't know what's going to be effective in the new rules? Well, different people have different things they want to do in the game. Because they have announced that there's open play, narrative play, and also matched play, the people that are going to be interested in playing open and narrative don't maybe really care a ton about how effective they're going to be. So they may want to go out and buy new models because they're like, hey, I'm interested in the fact that I can play open play with my brother or with my sister or with my friends or whatever, and we can just have a great time and play. And so yeah, I'm going to go down that road. If you're a competitive player and you want to play only matched play and stuff like that, yeah, then I would probably figure you wouldn't. But if you're a narrative player, you could say, I want to build a warband of guys that are like this, and you could just start doing it. And then when the stats and stuff and everything show up, you'd be like, oh, cool, okay, well, maybe I need to add one more dude here, or maybe this guy I can't bring along because he's too powerful or whatever, but I can bring him on special games or whatever when we're doing some sort of narrative thing. I really love the fact that they're deciding to really... And obviously you could play open, you could play narrative back in the day, you could just decide to throw all your stuff on the table and have a good time. But the fact that they're pushing it more, giving you scenarios for that kind of stuff, all that jazz, definitely super. I think it's a really smart idea on their part to go down that road because it worked pretty well for Age of Sigmar. Nearly everybody that I know that goes to a local shop to sit down and play like a pickup type game, they generally use a matched play because you're going to say to this person you don't know very well, when we meet at the shop, how many points? 1,000 points? Okay, cool. But when you're going to have somebody over to your house and you're going to have just like a big battle because you think it's going to be really cool and you got all your terrain set up and stuff like that, open play, narrative play, absolutely. The couple of the guys that I do play Age of Sigmar with, we want to really do like a narrative campaign. We want to go down that road and make it I don't want to say it's going to be like Mordheim, or even Shadow War, where your guys level up and stuff like that, but we definitely want to kind of do some of that cool stuff that way. So, Jesse Daniel says, I played Shadow War this past week. Oh, hang on. So many comments. I apologize. I always pick the ones up towards the top and then they disappear. I played Shadow War this past week. It made me want to dig out my Tau Pathfinder for it. Well, that's cool. Yeah, Shadow War is awesome. And I think it's a really smart move on their part to bring that back for the people like me who want to eat a whole bunch of appetizers, and try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think it's a smart idea. They underestimated it. Well, a lot of people are like, well, man, they didn't make enough of those box sets. They sure did underestimate it. Well, yes and no. If you look at those box sets, it's basically 3 of their terrain sets in there. And those 3 terrain sets retail for, looks like $175. But that box set is $130. Plus it comes with scouts and orcs in it. So it was a pretty good deal. And some people have said, well, why would they give you such a good deal in that box set? It doesn't make sense. Well, A, because they didn't make that many of them, so you had to sort of rush. But just like, what was that board game they made with the 2 Imperial Knights? I forget what it was called. But it came with 2 Imperial Knights, which are like $110, $120 models. And you bought that board game with 2 Imperial Knights inside for like $175. So it was a really good deal. They do that, Their $85 start collecting boxes are all really good deals. So the time of them saying, oh, hey, look at this great bundle deal that we've given you, and it's not any cheaper than normal retail, they don't do that as much anymore. They still do it here and there, but they are definitely understanding that they do need to make bundle deals to get people started that are good prices. So I think that that's what they did with Shadow War. So I think that one of the reasons they didn't make a zillion of them is because they were like, we can do this to get it started and get people, excited, but, we don't want to really give away all of the ranch for free. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how well those other terrain sets sell. I mean, like with me, I'm going to use a lot of other terrain besides the terrain that comes in that Shadow War stuff. And if you watch any of the battle reports from mini wargaming, things like that, they've been not using the terrain from the Shadow War box at all. They have the Shadow War box, but they've been just using terrain they've got around the place, walkways and stuff like that. And you can totally do that too, especially since they're going to be releasing the book, so that's really good. Greetings from Russia. I want to ask you a question. Will GW translate rule sets in other languages? In the past, they have, from what I understand. I don't know about Russian. That's a good question. I know that they're, like, back in the day, they used to release, like, I used to see, like, leaked copies of codexes that were in German or in French. There were times that rules that they produced in English didn't make as much sense as the rules that they translated to German. Like, if you read the German version, it made a little bit more sense, and then there wasn't as much discussion back and forth about, well, does it go this way or this way? If you read the German version, oh, it's very specific. Oh, okay, cool. And that's just the different, limitations of different languages. So they do generally translate stuff. I don't know if they've been translating much lately, honestly. I haven't been keeping up with that, so that is a good question. You would think, especially with the digital stuff, it wouldn't be too difficult. But that being said, translation is expensive. Where I work, every once in a while, when we build apps, we have to build apps that'll be translated into other languages, and yeah, that kind of stuff, it gets spendy. So you have to work with a bunch of different people and make it happen. We're not smart enough to translate it to other languages, so yeah, it can be a big cost. Dorelia says, I still don't like Stormcast heads. I replaced mine with Bretonnian heads. I've seen some cool conversions. And I know now that Games Workshop is also, I think, aren't they producing new heads that you can put on that are female? I thought that they were. Or somebody else is. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting kind of conversions I've been seeing to Stormcast now that they've been out for a while. Jack Rowley says, I've been out of the hobby for a few years. Just got back a few months ago, hanging on until 8th. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Dennis Bauer says, great time to buy from Rage Quitters. I don't know that you'll see as many Rage Quitters as you did with Fantasy. And I think that's going to be in part due to things like this frequently asked questions. Games Workshop being much more upfront with the changes and talking about it more, I think is going to cause there to be less rage quit, frankly. So yeah, I think that's going to be good. Saber XT says, you guys think small point armies are still viable and in 8th edition and Shadow War? Well, with Shadow War, it's a different story because you start at 1,000 points and then you build up as you're playing a campaign, so it's not exactly the thing. My hope is that 8th edition, just like Age of Sigmar, really only has, basically Age of Sigmar has 1,000, 2,000, and 2,500 point armies. That's what they list in the book, although a lot of people also do 1,500 as well. If they do something like that, if they make it so that the game does scale well and work well with a smaller army, what we would now consider in the current point scheme for 7th edition 40k, let's say maybe 750 or 1,000 points, if they can make the game work well at that point level, which, let's be honest, those of us who've played it in the past know that 7th edition doesn't work super hot that small. At 750 there are certain armies that just can't get anything done because they can't bring in their big boys, or there's other armies that are kind of overpowered because they have a lot of small chaff that's actually quite useful. I used to play a lot of Combat Patrol, and Combat Patrol is 400 points. There's special rules about things you can take and things you can't. It's kind of like Kill Team, although Kill Team's 200 points, but 400 points. You could still bring in a couple of vehicles, but they had to be specific types and things like that. And there were some armies, like normal Space Marine armies, just did not work super well in Kill Team, whereas armies, because you just couldn't bring enough guys. It was just a way to fire. Like if you brought orcs, you could bring tons of orcs, and even though they're all kind of not great at shooting, there was a lot of them, so you were throwing a lot of dice. Eldar were really good because they were also good at shooting, but still roll a lot of dice. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. I would love it to it would be really good on them to make it so that that game could scale like Age of Sigmar does, because I've got a lot of friends who like to have, got a 1,000 point army for Age of Sigmar, perfect. It's a perfect spot for them. But then I know other people who are like, we're playing a 2,500 point game today and it's going to be huge. That's awesome too. If that's what you want to do, excellent. So yeah. Tyler Miller says, I'd buy models if they canceled the game entirely. I just love orcs that much. Well, orcs are pretty cool. L. Colt asks, where'd it go? Oh, no, it just disappeared on me. See, I keep... it was something about the codexes going away. Yes, the codexes are going away. All right, now I seem to be caught up on the thing here. Shadow War is basically Necromunda, but with 40k models. Yes, that is very true. It is Necromunda 2.0 for the most part, but instead of it being gangers and mutants and things like that, it's all 40k models. I think it was a smart idea for them. I really do. Sam Hinchy has got a question that's about hobby. That's good. That's good to hear. All right, good. Is gesso or brush on primer easy to use? Does it ruin your brushes? Is it easy to use? Yes. Gesso may not be good to use on certain brushes. If you're using real high-end, fancy, non-synthetic brushes, I wouldn't use gesso to do that portion of it. I would use like a synthetic brush, paint on the gesso, wait for it to dry, and then paint over the top of it. Brush on primer, normal acrylic brush on primer, I use brush on primer not so much to prime models, but sometimes to cover up, like if I've sprayed a model but I didn't get it in exactly every nook and cranny I meant to, I will go back with, I have Reaper brush on primer in black and white, and I will kind of just dab it into the little areas or brush it into the little areas, and that stuff's fine for normal brushes. Whatever brushes you use, brush on primer, from like if it's an acrylic brush on primer, fine. Gesso has got a lot more particulate in it to some degree, and it's different material. I don't know if it would ruin a non-synthetic brush. I wouldn't take the chance, I guess, but yeah. Gesso, for those of you that don't know, it's something that fine artists use. I was going to say back in the day, but it's still the case to these days. If you try to paint oil paint directly onto canvas, over time, years and years and years, the acid in the canvas will eat, the acid in the paint will eat the canvas, and then your painting will fall apart. So what painters back 1,000 years ago figured out was if they made this material, which is called gesso, and they painted the canvas with that first, which is generally white, but you can also buy it in black now. You paint the canvas first with gesso, let that dry, and then paint on top of the gessoed canvas. Boom. It protects the canvas and it doesn't fall apart over, 50 to 100 years or whatever. So yeah, but it's also a good thing to use if you need to prime indoors and you can't spray outside. Gesso is also something that you can use pretty well for priming your models. Bubba Gump asks, what do you think of the new Death Guard? I like the look of them a lot, and being a Nurgle fan, someone just recently, I forget, I think it was yesterday in the chat that I did with the Patreon folks, someone yesterday said that basically the new Death Guard models look like Blight Kings, but for 40k, and I was like, ooh, yeah, that's a very good example. And I am completely on board with making Blight Kings that work for 40k, because I love me the Blight Kings and that stuff. So yeah, definitely. Mortalitus says ditching Codex is the best decision. Yes, I think so. I can understand why people will be peeved, especially people who just bought like a new Codex. Deathwatch ones, the new Chaos ones. I mean, I just bought an Orc Codex recently because I was going to be using them in Kill Team. So now I'm like, oh, well, But it's still got cool Orc stuff. I can read about how the Orcs are, all Orky or whatever. And so that's good. But yeah, I understand that. The Caldium. Does the new edition of 40k potentially being more similar to Age of Sigmar mean you may be tempted to start it back up again? I'm still not sure how I feel about the new edition. Well, I kind of just talked about that a little bit, about how I don't know that I would jump back into 40k directly, especially since I can really get my feet wet in a bunch of different armies with Shadow War. Like I said just a little bit ago, it reminds me of the whole concept of getting a bunch of appetizers. I can do a little bit of these guys and a little bit of these guys and a little bit of Necrons or whatever, whereas depending on how 8th edition goes, they may, make it so that it may be a deal where maybe you can get 1,000-point armies, which are maybe 20 to 30 models tops. I could see getting back into 40k potentially for something like that. The thing that's going to be interesting is that, and you see a little bit of this in Age of Sigmar, but you don't see it as much in Age of Sigmar as you're going to see it in 40k. 40k is very vehicle heavy. You don't have vehicles per se in Age of Sigmar. You have some sort of bigger monstrous creatures and things like that, but you don't have a ton of them. So if you're playing in matched play in Age of Sigmar, the behemoths, which are the bigger models, you can only bring a certain number of them at a certain point level. Whereas in 40k, there's nothing to say you can't bring tons of different vehicles within your points. It's just dependent upon the FOC, which I can't. Formation of Command. I forget what FOC stands for right now. But yeah, it's your FOC, which is saying, oh, you got to take an HQ and 2 troops and no more than this and no more than that, fast attack, all that jazz. So it'll be interesting to see how that works in the smaller armies. But right now, when you're playing, unless you decide to play totally open, you generally can't bring a whole bunch of behemoths. If you're playing match play, you have to kind of follow those rules that they got set up, which are a low-end kind of FOC for Age of Sigmar. Lord Hedwich said, I just bought 7th edition rules and 3 codexes. LOL. I appreciate that you can laugh at that. There's a lot of good information in those books, don't get me wrong. I mean, like the storyline stuff and the hobby stuff and all that jazz. Lord knows they make good books. They always have. Probably the best. I mean, it's funny when people are always like, oh, they make the best models in the industry. And they do. They also make some of the best damn books in the industry. When you go back and look at first edition 40k and look at the artwork in that book. I showed off that first edition reprint book, that 30th anniversary book that I picked up at Adepticon. I showed that off in my Adepticon video a while back. When you look at the artwork in that book in comparison to any codex or anything that they're putting out now, it is astounding. Well, I mean, just look at... So this is just an image that I found online, and I kind of blurred it a little bit because I do that sometimes. But I mean, like, there was nothing like that in first edition, like, artwork. Half the stuff in first edition artwork looks like stuff that friends of mine drew on their notebooks during biology class in high school. I mean, some of it was really cool, and some of it I still have a incredible like nostalgia love of. But in comparison to the new stuff, as far as artwork, just alone, and like layout and all that stuff, it's amazing. They make amazing books. So, Force Organization Chart. Thank you, Dumeyer One. I know what FOC stands for, but it was on the tip of my tongue and I couldn't think of it. Hey Adam, hobby problem. Painting a Space Marine chaplain, and when I painted his skull helmet, it looked very chalky. And then it scrolled off the top. Hang on, I'm getting back to it. I stripped it, tried again, and chalky. Any suggestions on what I'm doing wrong? It sounds to potentially like it's maybe the paint. White paints have usually the most amount of pigment in them because that's how it works. And frequently white paints have the biggest pigment. When I'm airbrushing primer, white primer always dries on the tip more than black primer does. It's just the way it works. So, yeah, I would tell you probably to thin more, but I'd also tell you to shake that paint a lot more and maybe add some thinner directly into the pot. You know, if it's a pot paint, fine. Make sure you're using a wet palette, obviously, but that'll help a lot. Because, yeah, white can be kind of chalky. So that's just something you sort of have to fight against. White is kind of a weird color, and sometimes like red is a weird pigment as well for some reason. So, yeah. Mecca says, I have seen some stellar books from other companies as well. Absolutely. You know, Mantic has really stepped up their game. Like, if you've seen any of the, what is it? Like, if you look at the original, like, Dreadball stuff and the original Dead Zone stuff, if you look at the comparison between the Dead Zone 2.0 and the Dead Zone 1.0 books, they've made amazing strides. If you look at Dungeon Saga for them is an amazing product, and I don't think it gets enough praise. So Dungeon Saga comes in what looks like a giant book. Like, the box looks like a book, and you open it like a book, and all the parts are in there, and it's really cool. And just when they first announced Dungeon Saga, and I just looked at the logo, I was like, that is a step up right there for our friends over at Mantic. It's really nice. So there are companies out there, obviously, that are doing amazing-looking stuff. When Malifaux first started, a lot of their artwork was really cringy, like not good. Like Malifaux 1.0 book, even 1.5. But in 1.5, their 1.5 main book, I started seeing pieces of artwork that were so much better than the other pieces of the artwork in the book. And I was like, wow, these are really good. And they make these other ones look like complete garbage. And then when the 2.0 book came out, it was all that artist or artists of that caliber. And now the art that Malifaux does is astounding looking. So yeah, tons of other companies also do stuff. I think that Games Workshop has generally been more consistent about it, and specifically over the last 10 years. But the thing is again, rising tides raise all ships. So the fact that Games Workshop keeps setting that bar means that, you know, to a lot of people, they look at that and they go, oh, well, they're the big ones in the industry, and I don't like that, and whatever, and that's fine. But when they keep setting that bar, they make a lot of the other indie companies go, we also have to then move to that. And you know, not everybody has to. Obviously, there's plenty of games out there that can put out books and do whatever they want, and that's fine. But when the art directors at these companies are looking at the stuff that Games Workshop puts out, that makes them generally go, yeah, we need to step it up. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that make really good books, and they put out good-looking artwork. I think that part of that is because digital artwork is a lot easier. It's not easier. Let me take that back. It can be quicker. As a person who's drawn and painted in the past and is not as good at it as I would like, I can tell you, I pretty much never want to paint or draw manually again. I always like doing it digitally because I can do something and go, well, that didn't work, and then just, you know, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and then go a different direction. Which, when I was in college and I was painting on canvas, yeah, there's no Control Z on those canvases. You pretty much have to start over or cover it up, or, you know, it's difficult. So I don't know. It's just interesting to see how especially when going back and looking at like that book from 30 years ago, looking at the original Rogue Trader and comparing it to books these days. It's amazing to see the differences in the industry in 30 years. So yeah. Cheryl's Knight says, thanks, I'll give it a good shake and thin further. I have used a wet palette since the first week of getting into this hobby after watching your video. Oh, good. Glad to hear it. VJ Morph says, need more John Blanche. I know who you're talking about, obviously. John Blanche is an artist that's been with Games Workshop for a long time. I will say I'm warming to his art style, but I'm still not as big of a fan of his maybe as I should be. That being said, I love his conversions and sculpt. Like if you look in White Dwarf, there's an article by him just about every month, and he's done lots of cool conversions and sculpts. Like he doesn't really play 40k; he kind of plays his own sort of inquisitorial thing, and sometimes he just builds groups because he thinks it's fun and he likes it. But I love his sculpting and the things that he's doing and the conversions he's doing. He's converted that chaos, that Nurgle Chaos Lord model, that awesome one, old drippy. He's converted that guy like 28 different times, I swear to God. But yeah, sometimes his artwork is just a little too crazy for me. I don't know. It's not quite my kettle of fish, but I'm very glad that he's still doing it. The miniatures paintbrush. White pigment is hard. I mix with gel medium to tone down the chalkiness. Warcolor paint has the least chalky white paint I've ever used and includes gel medium to the mix. That's very interesting. I've never used Warcolor. I should really look into their stuff. White is made of titanium particles, which are basically cigar-shaped. If the paint is too dry, it will allow the particles to stand up and appear chalky. This is some serious science you guys are dropping here, and I appreciate it. I was just like, I don't know, I think that white paint is bigger. But you guys know what you're talking about, which is awesome. All right, I'm going to try to make this... It's going by fast and furious over here. All right. Andrew yells, where do you live in Wisconsin? Milwaukee here. Grew up in Stevens Point. I'm in the middle. I'm in the Fox River Valley. Who's your favorite Warhammer artist? That's a good question. I don't know. I really love the covers they've been doing lately on the codices. I don't know who... I think it's the same person who's doing them, but I don't know the person's name. Those are probably some of my... I do really like that style quite a bit. Blanche's models have always been a highlight of White Dwarf. Yeah, ever since they started showing his models in there, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And yeah, they do look really cool. Kilty O'Neill says, hey, Adam, how is Games Workshop able to command such a high price for their models? I'm surprised how inexpensive used GW items are on eBay compared to the retail prices. It's just the market, you know what I mean? People will pay for it. If people decided that they did not want to pay $50 for a box of Terminators anymore, then they wouldn't sell them at that price. If literally people were not buying them, they would stop selling them at that price, and they would try to lower the price to get people to buy them. But the fact of the matter is that generally any business will sell stuff at the price that the market will bear. So, and I have plenty of people who ask me about how to buy cheaper and things like that. And I tell them, go on to eBay. eBay is a good place to buy stuff. I mean, you're going to have to probably strip some models, and you're maybe going to have to, clean some mold lines and do some things like that. But if you want to get into wargaming really cheap, you can buy used models. I'm not even talking about like buying like a box. Like there's plenty of people that will sell completely unopened boxes of Games Workshop stuff for like 20% off on eBay. Sometimes it's stores that are doing it that aren't supposed to, technically by their licensing with Games Workshop. But the fact is that people will do that. Sometimes it's somebody who bought a whole bunch of stuff at one point, and now they need the money, or now they're not going to play 40k anymore, so they're getting rid of, completely unopened, still in the shrink kits. But there's also plenty of people who are like, hey, I've got all these models that I've got in a shoebox under my bed, and I'm going to sell them. And they look like garbage. But you look at them and go, I can strip a bunch of those and maybe make something happen, and then you can buy pretty cheap. But if you want to buy the new stuff, that's the price that they sell it at. It's just the way it kind of works, Like I said, if people didn't buy them at that price, they wouldn't keep selling them at that price. Just kind of the way the market works. I think they call that the invisible hand of the market. Maybe not. Lee Fitzgerald says, though they may be different models than their... No, I didn't catch that. That's a response to somebody else's question. They mentioned they wanted to reward people for bringing fluffy armies, so I think they will still have some sort of formation type thing. So, yeah, if it's anything like Age of Sigmar, which it may very well be, the way that Age of Sigmar works right now, for those of you that don't play, is that you can go online and download the War Scrolls, which are the basic rules for each possible unit in the game. You can download those for free, or you can get them on the app, because they make the app for Android and iOS. So you can find out all the information you need for that particular army, and you can download a PDF with all the stuff. But if you buy the book, then what happens is that, A, you get fluff, you get great artwork, you get some hobby stuff, but you also get usually some special rules for that army specifically, and the only place you can get them is in the book you bought. More often than not, they're battalions. So a battalion is like a formation in 40k. So what happens with a battalion is if you build a group that is this and this and this, and they tell you the things in the book, then you will have if you check off these boxes and you have these guys in there or whatever, then you will get this other special power. Now you have to pay points for your battalion special thing. Like you have to pay points for each of the things that go into the battalion, and then you have to actually pay points for the battalion. That's the new thing. That's what's interesting to me. In 40k, and I haven't played in a long time, and I've never played formations, but from what I understand, you get formation bonuses just because you have the things that go into the formation. Somebody let me know if I'm wrong on that. In Age of Sigmar, that's not the case. If you have this and this and this, and you pay the points for all of those, and then you want the battalion bonus, you also have to pay for the battalion bonus. It's maybe like 80 points or 100 points or something like that. But that's the way it works in Age of Sigmar. I could see them doing that exact same type of stuff with the new Warhammer 40,000. I don't know why they wouldn't, honestly. But again, those things would be in the books that you can potentially buy. But if you don't want to run, formations, then just you don't have to buy the books. That's the way it works with Age of Sigmar. I never run formations, so I basically never buy any of those books. I did buy the Grand Alliance Death book, which I was kind of like, it was okay. But I have not run any of those formations either. I generally I bought it. It was relatively inexpensive. So yeah. Jake the Snake asks, what's the cheapest way to get Warhammer figures? Well, I was just talking about that. eBay. Honestly, if you go onto eBay, buy other people's stuff who are getting rid of things, prepare to strip some models to make them, so you can paint them if they're already painted poorly or whatever. But that's probably your best bet. Adam, what do you mean? What do you mean is more art? To paint with airbrush or just with brush? Where is more feeling in your sight? I don't think that there's any difference between those two. I mean, obviously, one, you use one piece of material, and another one you use another piece of equipment. But painting with airbrush, I do both. I generally do my priming with airbrush. I do my base coating and my highlighting with airbrush, and then I go back and I do details with a paintbrush. There are people that don't like airbrush because they think it's cheating, and I don't understand that. Because, technically you could go back years ago and say, well, painting with a brush is cheating. You should be using a stick, or your fingers or whatever. To me, the concept of using an airbrush to get an effect, I don't see that as cheating at all. And especially if you're trying to win competitions and you're concerned about your life as an artiste or whatever, okay, maybe you could make some sort of discussion, but I don't even see it then. Use the tools that are available. I don't know why you wouldn't. But if you're just trying to crank out a bunch of guys to make them look nice on the tabletop, then cheat as much as possible. Use every possible trick at your disposal. If you don't have an airbrush, you can cheat with a rattle can. I did a video a number of years ago about rattle can tricks on how to do some rattle can stuff to make your army paint it up quicker, but still make it look kind of nice and look like you knew what you were doing, and highlighting and stuff like that. Knock yourself out. You know what I mean? If you look at each model that you are trying to put on the tabletop as a special, unique snowflake, you're going to take forever to get your army painted. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. There are plenty of people out there who don't even play. They just collect and they want to make their models look the best. That's great. But if you just want to have decent painted stuff and get into the hobby and have a good time, but still have a nice looking army, cheat. Just cheat like crazy. Absolutely. Scathed Zombie says, stripping models depends on the type of model. There's different solutions for metal, resin, plastic. In general, though, Super Clean, which is basically purple simple green, is the best. I like Super Clean, the purple stuff, myself. You're right, though. Like metal models, you can use a lot more, I don't want to say dangerous, you can use a lot more scary solutions to clean metal models. Resin models are very delicate, so you don't want to strip them with anything that's going to wreck them or make them squishy. So, but metal models are awesome. Zombie Boy says, I was at Salute yesterday. Ever been to the UK? Number one, no, I have not been to the UK. Number two, I saw interesting things coming out of Salute, and that's really cool. So, it's cool that you were there. I'm still amazed by Salute. I know it's like the biggest wargaming convention in the UK. And those of you who are in the UK, let me know why this is. It's just one day, right? It's just Saturday. It just seems odd to me why because when I went to Adepticon, I was there for 4 days and technically could have been there for 5 because it really sort of kind of starts in the afternoon on Wednesday. And I don't know why Salute is only a single day. Is it because it's really expensive to rent the hall for 2 days? I know it's in London, and I know London's very expensive. Is it just people aren't interested in being there for 2 days, or I don't know? It's just interesting. I'd love to hear why why it's only a 1-day convention. But I would love to check it out someday. So that would be kind of cool. Timothy asks, Adam, have you managed to get a hold of any of the new Shadow War terrain? I picked up a set of the terrain super cheap on eBay for £60. Great deal. I can't wait to have a go building and painting it. Yes, I bought the Shadow War box from my local friendly game store, my friendly local game store, and I actually did start building some of it yesterday. It's interesting stuff. Big, chemical tanks and walkways and things like that. And like I said, it's very modular. And so it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be part of the terrain for my Shadow War board, but not all of it. A lot of the other stuff is going to be Games Workshop, Cities of Death type ruins, and some other stuff I'm going to work into it as well. So definitely. Kraken says, acetone is awesome for metal models, but melts everything else. Yes, and it's also super flammable. So if you're going to use acetone, do it outside and don't smoke. Well, you just shouldn't smoke in general, I think. I've heard that it's bad for you, so don't do that. But also, do not smoke. Acetone is super flammable, so don't do that. Isaac asks, what's the best varnish? My favorite is Tester's Dull Coat. It comes in little tiny spray cans, little tiny rattle cans. And I don't know that you can get it in Europe anymore because it's probably super bad for you. But we have not decided to make it illegal or whatever in America yet. So, yeah, but I like matte varnish. I like my models to look flat matte and not glossy when they're done. And it's the best one, in my opinion. I've heard very good things about the matte varnish from Army Painter, but I haven't tried it yet. So, I do keep meaning to do a video that compares a lot of different matte varnishes so you can see, but I haven't been able to figure out yet the best way to make a bunch of identical models. I need to maybe dip them in something or something like that so that they're as identical as possible. And then, I wonder if I should just take a glossy, Krylon Fusion spray paint them all the same so they're all roughly the same glossiness, the same model. I could get some cheap Space Marines on eBay or something like that. So they're all the same model. Spray them all and then go by and then do them all with matte varnish and see which works best. That would be maybe a good video. Seems like it would take a lot of work, but it might be a good video. There's something someone was talking about Salute. Zombie Boy says, yeah, it's just Saturday. It's because the Excel Center hangar is very expensive and organized by South London warlords, so it's a gaming society. Yeah, it's just interesting that there's not somebody else. Scoop and Loop says, re-salute. Because the locals get nervous when so many nerds congregate in one place and the organizers don't want to be banned. That's interesting to me as well. And I've told this story before on this channel. So a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I was at Gen Con, which I'll be going to get Gen Con again this year. And so if you're going to Gen Con, I hope to be able to meet up. But I was at Gen Con, and I was staying in a hotel that had a continental breakfast. So every morning you could go downstairs, and there was free breakfast, and, So nerds love breakfast. So we were all down there, at the hotel, and it was pretty full. So I was sitting at a table. The other guys that I was staying with had already left, and one of them was taking a shower, so I was there by myself eating breakfast. And I had an empty table, or an empty chair. So a guy came over and said, hey, do you mind if I sit here? That's fine. So, and he was English. And then so we started up a conversation over our breakfast, and I asked him if this was the first time he'd been to America. And he said, yes, it was the first time he'd been to Gen Con as well, obviously. And we talked about how are you liking it? Is something that what do you think? And he said that it was very interesting because it was very different than it was in the UK. And I said, well, how so? He said, well, everyone is much more accepting here. And I didn't know what he meant by that, but what he meant was he was amazed to walk down the street in Indianapolis, downtown Indianapolis, and all these restaurants had big giant signs in the window that said, welcome Gen Con players, or welcome, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And he said that wouldn't happen in the UK. And I thought it was very interesting, because I guess to me it just makes sense. If you're, if you want those people to come in, you put a sign in the window saying, hey, welcome, Gen Con people, welcome local dentists, welcome whatever. If there's some sort of convention going on in town, you put up a thing saying, hey, you guys are welcome to come in here, totally, because you want business. But he said that's not the way it works over in the UK with those types of conventions and stuff. He says that there's no signs up or anything like that for that kind of thing. And I thought that was interesting. And I don't completely understand why, especially with wargaming. I mean, you UK guys kind of really picked up the ball and ran with it. You pretty much are the big dogs in that area. And it's just interesting to me that it just is that different and handled that differently. I think the next year that I was at Gen Con, I went to get a burger at, so Indianapolis is the home of the Indianapolis Colts, which is an American football team. And so there was there's a restaurant underneath the hotel that we were in on the first floor that was the Indianapolis Colts, restaurant, pub and grill or whatever. And it was this big fancy place. And there was sports memorabilia all over the walls, with the long storied history of the Indianapolis Colts and all that kind of jazz. I'm not a sports fan, but it was the closest place. I'm like, I'll just go in there and get a burger. But while I was there, instead of wearing like football outfits the entire time I was there for that burger, all the waiters and waitresses were wearing T-shirts with like Superman logo, Batman logo that had built-in capes, like sewed to the back. They had giant Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, like clings, like big stickers on the window that you can kind of see through. They're like translucent, and said Magic the Gathering and all this stuff, and had wizards and crazy beasts and all this stuff. And all the TVs, which would normally be showing football, I would assume American football, they were all showing The Hobbit. So they knew what kind of audience was coming into this place, even though it was basically a sports-themed restaurant. They knew during Gen Con, we need to put some nerd stuff in here to bring in the nerds, and that's totally cool, I mean, it's interesting. So yeah, it's just interesting to see how it's different in other countries, specifically in the UK, because, Games Workshop and Mantic and all these big companies, Warlord, all that stuff. So yeah, there you go. That's my little story. Let's get back to some questions, shall we? Greetings from Mexico. Do value of magnetized miniatures increase, or is it not really that important in the open market? If you are good at magnetizing miniatures and then you decide to sell them on eBay, I think that's a definite benefit. When you sell a miniature, because I've had, Sam even, Painter Sam from the channel, he doesn't do it as much anymore, but he used to sell models on eBay. Just like a new army would come out, I don't know, like Blood Angels Codex, so he would make a bunch of HQ units that were Blood Angels colors and kind of sell them, on speculation. And he'd put them up on eBay, but he would put them up, he would look at like the rules and try to figure out what like the best 2 or 3 combinations for this, HQ unit is, and then he would magnetize them so that if you bought this one model, you would get it and you could swap out, a plasma pistol or a power sword or whatever. And they sold pretty well for him. So yeah, if you're good at it and you can do the magnetizing well, I think it would be a definite benefit for trying to sell something like that on eBay. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't. Because a lot of times if you sell a model, especially an HQ unit, and you use maybe like a sword and a weapon or a sword and a shield or whatever, that people are like, yeah, I'm not going to use that because of it. It's a great paint job, but I don't want to use the model because of that setup. I want it to be like this. That could be a negative. So, Shadow Wars rules worth buying via eBay or hold out for official GW release soon? I would say probably hold out for the official, because the reason the official, the new printed version is also going to have in it Sisters of Battle and Inquisitors, I believe. So those 2 will be additions to it, and they will put out a PDF for those of us who already have the current, the one that came in the box. We'll be able to download the free PDF to have those additions in there. But from what they've said on the community website, the new book, when it does come out, the standalone book, is going to have additional stuff in it like that. So that'll be cool. So yeah, I would tell you, unless you really are itching to play it like right now, but I think it's supposed to be, that new book is supposed to be coming out end of this month maybe. So it's not like a super long wait, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. What is Finecast, and why does everybody seem to dislike it? Finecast is a resin product that Games Workshop was doing a number of years ago. And the reason that people don't like it is because it wasn't very good. It's there was a famous post, maybe on Daka, one of the big forum sites, Warseer, I don't know. A kid was building a Lord of the Rings model. I want to say it was Gandalf on Shadowfax, his horse. And he built this model, Finecast, at his desk. His desk was overlooked by a window. And he built this model, and then he went to school. And then when he came home, it had been sunny all day, and the sun had shone through the window onto the model and had melted it to the point where Shadowfax the horse was all bent and like his legs had collapsed. And so it's not a great material. Forge World resin is a much better resin. The Finecast resin is not good, and that's why generally people don't like it. They have been basically phasing it out, but there are still some older models that are still made in Finecast once in a while, but I think in the long term they are pretty much phasing it out. And if you try to strip Finecast models, good luck. You can't use much that's even vaguely... Like, I wouldn't even use alcohol. You'd pretty much just use purple stuff or green stuff, or not green, the simple green or super clean. But anything else beyond that, you would not use brake fluid. I wouldn't use Dettol, none of that stuff. Yeah. Mr. Armour says, I guess Salute's just one day because the UK is so much smaller. I got up at it and it was just there after 10, and I live half the country away. I could also see there being an issue with, if you wanted to have it multiple days, it would be very difficult for people to come and stay multiple days in London, because that would be super crazy expensive, or maybe there's not enough housing or whatever. People talk about how, well, if Gen Con gets much bigger, they're going to have to move it to a bigger city, and maybe they'll move it from Indianapolis to Chicago. The problem with doing that is that there's not a lot of places to stay in downtown Chicago. There's a great big, the McCormick Center is this huge kind of convention center place, but I don't know where people stay when they're going to a thing there. You know what I mean? They have to, I think, all drive in and park, and that's not going to work out super hot. So I could see that being a problem as well with something like Salute, where if you wanted people to stay multiple nights, you couldn't because there's no place to stay down near there. That's potentially a problem. Adam, do you build your models fully or in groups? Or do you like it to paint it when it's all built, especially when they are just to play for? Is it a price of perfection problem I've got? Yeah, I would say I build my models almost always completely and then paint. Only once in a great while do I keep them partially separate or sub-assemblies. I was talking about this a little bit earlier. My Chaos Warriors for my Age of Sigmar army, I kept their shields off, but it was because, A, their shields were huge and were going to cover a whole bunch of their body, which was going to make it much more difficult to paint, and B, the shields, gluing a shield back on again later was super simple. It's a very simple connection. It's just like a ball on the back of the shield that goes into a socket on the arm, and it's a very simple thing to do. I find that gluing a bolter back into the Space Marine's hands is very difficult later on, so I don't generally do that. So I figure if the bolter is covering his chest, I don't need to paint his chest that much, So, but your mileage may vary, absolutely. Is it a bad idea to get into 40k with 8th edition coming to ruin the game? I don't think it's going to ruin the game. If you think it's going to ruin the game, then I'd tell you not to get into 40k, honestly. Maybe look at some other game if you want. Honestly, if you're just getting into the hobby, and when I say the hobby, I mean the entire hobby, game, any kind of tabletop wargaming, I would tell you to look for a skirmish game. I would tell you to look for something that really interests you. Let's say you're really into fantasy or steampunk or post-apocalyptic. Find a small company that makes stuff. Maybe find a small game system, like something like Song of Blades and Heroes. Song of Blades and Heroes, you can use whatever models you like. So you could use a bunch of Reaper Bones models and some other stuff that you found or whatever. Games like Frostgrave, again, you don't need to use their models. You can use whatever models you want. And then you can kind of build and paint the things you want and then play the game that you want to play. Frostgrave is good for that. Wreck Age, post-apocalyptic, if you're into that kind of stuff, that's super good for that. When I play Wreck Age, I've got a warband of or a crew. Matthew will have to tell me what exactly the names of the units are. But it's like 4 guys. I've got a group of stakers and it's 4 guys, So, yeah, I would tell you if you want to get into it, that's the way to go. Now, if you are like one of those people who always wants to go down every Saturday to your local game shop and get a pickup game, well, then you're going to have to find something that's a little more popular, potentially. And that's kind of the trick. But a game, again, like, Malifaux, you can buy a crew for Malifaux for $45 to $50. And if you wanted to buy 2 crews and then put them together and paint them, and then you could play against anybody you want, just give them this crew, say, you guys, you run this crew, I'm going to run this crew, we're going to play this game. And then you don't have to worry about finding somebody else who plays it. You can't do that as easily with a game like a big army game like 40k, or even something like Bolt Action. You're probably not going to come up with 2 armies for Bolt Action just so you can go down to the shop and go, okay, you run these 30 guys in this tank, I'm going to run these 30 guys in this tank, and then we'll play this game and I'll teach you how to play. That's harder to do. Smaller games, that's way easier to do. So that's what I would tell you. If you think that 8th edition is going to ruin 40k, then I'd tell you not to get into 40k, because you've kind of made your decision at that point, in my mind. So, isopropyl alcohol is great for stripping plastic and fine cast, says that guy on YouTube. I'm going to have to... I don't know. I've not tried it, so... If you're concerned about ruining a model that you're trying to strip, you should always try to find something, another model or a piece or a sprue that's made of the same material, and then see what happens when you try to use that material on it. I have used Simple Green and Super Clean, both on Finecast, and did not destroy Finecast. So I know that stuff works because I've tried it. I've not tried isopropyl alcohol, so, your mileage may vary, but give it a try. If you're doing something, like a lot of times Finecast will have like almost a sprue, kind of like plastic models do, and you might be able to find some Finecast sprue and then try it in there and see if it gets soft with whatever material you're going to be using. Let me see here. I think that I've got a bunch of other... Is it a bit... We've done that. Salute is really only a trade show with demonstration games, no tournaments or anything. That's true, too. I've noticed that. Like, when you go to Gen Con or Adepticon, there's seminars, and there's tournaments, and there's demos, and there's all this stuff. There's everything under the sun. And from what I have seen from the coverage that I've seen from Salute, it is basically just a big trade show. You walk around the trade floor, and then there's some demo games, and that's pretty much it, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. From what I understand, too, and this is, I think, one of the coolest things, is it's also a place where a lot of people in the UK come together. A lot of people who are all wargamers all come together in one spot and then hang out and chit-chat. Like, you come in, you buy some stuff, but you spend a lot of the time just talking, catching up with friends that you haven't seen in person for quite some time. For me, Adepticon's like that. It just gets to go on for 4 days, which is sort of fun. Yes. Zombie Boy asks, edge highlight or dry brush? I can never decide. I decide very easily by generally not ever edge highlighting because I'm kind of terrible at it. And I look at Sam's edge highlighting and I think, wow, I wish I could do it like that, but I can't. And I've tried and it doesn't work out. It's always... So I have a tendency to generally dry brush more than edge highlighting. So the difference, for those of you that don't know, edge highlighting is when you take your brush, you've got some paint on it, and so this is the bristle part, and let's say this is a thing that you're going to... And you basically just run it along the side. And what you can do is, so let's say this thing is a darker blue, you can take a lighter blue and run it along the edge to make the edge sort of pop. If everything was one color, you might not see the differentiation as much, but when you do this, it kind of, adds some contrast and makes that edge pop. The other option is to dry brush, which is basically taking some paint on the brush, brushing most of it off so there's very little pigment left, and then just, brushing it along the material. I do a lot of dry brushing. I like to call it directional dry brushing. So if I'm doing something light, I will brush down. So let's say this is purple, and now I take a lighter color purple, and I just brush it down. I don't go back and forth because I want the lighter color purple to just hit on the top parts, but not on the bottom parts. Then it looks like you're basically kind of faking it to make it look like the light is coming from above, and that kind of tricks the eye and gives it a little bit more depth and contrast. It depends on the model. I mean, if you're trying to do like chainmail, then I would dry brush in both directions because you want to catch all the edges possible with the silver, let's say. But in a lot of times, especially with terrain, when I'm dry brushing, I'm just brushing down with a lighter color to give it. And the trick is, that's kind of fun too, is if you want to, you could use a darker color and brush up, because then you can add darkness to the undersides of stuff and it'll make it look more like it's in shadow. So, tricking the eye to add in highlights, to add in shadows, that's part of miniatures painting. a lot of times when I first started, I was just like, well, why don't I just let the sun and the ground do their job? Why don't I just let the shadow be the shadow and let the light above be the light above? And you can do that, but the trick is that because the model's so small, you have to sort of do more to make the eye actually see it. It has something to do about the size of photons, or I don't know, it's science, but it's a situation where, like, if you saw like something from a distance that's very large, it's already pre-highlighted and pre-shaded, but as things get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, light doesn't get any smaller. Like the particles or waves or whatever, I don't know. I'm no light scientist, but that's from what I understand. So that's what's supposed to happen. Sam Hinch, she says, I've seen some 3D printed shoulder pads for 40k. Are those usually good quality? No, generally not. They're not terrible, but unless they've been printed on an amazingly expensive 3D printer, you're probably, at least if you're me, you're going to look at it and see little striations, the little lines of each layer as the 3D printing is going on. And so for me, on something that small, like on a piece of terrain, 3D printing is great. On a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing, not so good. Now, that being said, I did pick up, when I was at Adepticon this year, there was a booth from a company there called Shapeways. Shapeways is a company that you can go to and buy. They have a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be 3D printed, and it's kind of like you can just scroll through stuff and find something and go, oh, that's cool, I want 4 of those, and they will 3D print them and send them to you. Also, however, you could send them a computer file, if you know how to make 3D files. You could send them, upload a computer file, and then say, send me 4 of these, and then they'll do it. You obviously have to pay for it. And then even beyond that, you could upload a computer file of something to be 3D printed, and then you could put it into the marketplace, and then other people will come along and go, ooh, I want one of those. And then, the quality of the stuff they're putting out is pretty good. I want to paint it, because most of it is clear, so it's sort of hard to tell if it's ridged or not, but I want to paint it and see what it looks like. But they gave me some small little pieces, I don't know if it's like an autocannon or something, but because they're starting to focus on the miniatures people as an industry. And so their equipment is much more expensive than any equipment you or I would keep at our house. So their quality can be better. But I'd like to paint some of it up to see what it really looks like. So what else have we got over here? Evan Simmons says, do you think GW will remove codexes in 8th edition? That's a good question, in that I talked about it earlier. They've said yes, they will. If you go if you go to their website, they've got an article that's like an announcement about 8th edition coming, and there is a PDF that you can download that's got 3 pages of frequently asked questions for the new edition already, and they say right in there, codexes will be going away. So, yeah, that's going to be happening. Luke B says, lots of models do dry brush special units to edge highlight. If you're good and happy with your edge highlighting, then that's the way to go. I just don't seem to be very good at it. I need to practice, I guess, more or something, but I have a tendency to stick with dry brushing myself. But like I said, sometimes I do it directionally, so there's that. PDF kill team lists with Adeptus Sisters of Battle and Inquisition for Armageddon is available on the GW website already. Oh, no kidding, Uther. Oh, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, because I'm interested in running an Inquisition list some point down the road. Years ago, when the Inquisition came out as a digital codex supplement, when I was still playing 6th edition, 7th edition 40k, 6th edition, I was interested in running like an ally group, basically, of Inquisition. So I went and bought a bunch of models on eBay and different places like that. And then I never really... So now I've still got some. So I could build myself a fun little warband for Shadow War out of Inquisition. I'll have to check the website for that. Rudimus asks, hello, Adam. What would you recommend for beginners when it comes to transportation your painted models from location to location over long distances? Well, for long distances, I would tell you to find a good foam case with hard sides. So I'm going to Valhalla again in October. Valhalla is in Salt Lake City, which is on the other side of the country from me, and I'm going to be flying. So I'm taking models with me. Last year I took my Age of Sigmar army. I may take my Age of Sigmar army again this year, but I can guarantee you that this year I'll be taking plenty of warbands for Shadow War Armageddon. Already, people that are going to Valhalla have already talked about because it's a small retreat. There's only about 40 of us that go. I've been invited as a big YouTube celebrity or whatever by Wargamer Girl, another YouTube celebrity who's running it. She and her husband run Valhalla now. And anyway, so I'm bringing a bunch of stuff there that's going to be Shadow War stuff, and I'm bringing it in a case. Last year when I went, I took a battle foam case with foam on the inside, and it's a soft-sided case, but each of the panels in the soft-sided case they've got a piece of hard plastic on the inside, so it's bendable. You can, but if you guys have ever seen battle foam, it's an interesting type of case, and I like battle foam a lot. But yeah, any kind of case like that, if you're going to be going long distances, is good. And if you're going to be flying like I am, make sure that it's the right size for carry-on. For battle foam, and I know this just because I was using it, battle foam, they make a bag called 432, and that's the right size for carry-on. If you go bigger, then they will not allow you to take it on to carry-on. You have to check that bag. So yeah, but I think that kind of stuff is the best. I have seen... I had a friend, Sam, actually, when we used to play 40k back in the day, when I was first learning it, he used to bring his orcs in an egg container. You know what I mean? Like a styrofoam egg container. You would get them at the grocery store, and he would just have orcs in each of the little cups. And that worked out well for him. So you put those in a cardboard box, and you're set. So yeah, absolutely. Edge highlight early on in the highlights, then do glazes over it. Now you have... edges with lovely gradients. I took a class years ago during Adepticon from Justin from Secret Weapon Miniatures, and he showed us an edge highlighting trick, which I keep meaning to try and I haven't. And it's not using paint. Well, not directly. It's using watercolor pencils. And what he does is he rubs these watercolor pencils. You get a big package of watercolor pencils, and you rub it along the edges, the hard edges of something. So let's say it's a dark blue, you use a lighter or a medium blue as your edge highlight, and you rub these watercolor pencils across those edges, and then you take, I think it was a Q-tip, like a cotton swab for your ears, and he would get it a little wet, and then he would basically just feather out the edges. So like if you've got a line that runs along, here, and you've rubbed your pencil along this line, and you want it to start to fade out as it gets closer to the corners or whatever, then he would just use because it's a watercolor pencil, he would use water then, and it would just basically kind of blend it away to nothing at these edges, and it was kind of a cool look. And I think I bought a small box of like 8 watercolor pencils, and I just haven't tried it. I'll have to look for. I think I know where they are. They're near my workbench down in the basement, but I should be doing that. Evil Lizard says, "How do you like your coffee?" Normally with like 1 Splenda in it. That's otherwise, no cream. And it's currently a little cold, but it's okay. Turrican says, "I'm painting an Inquisition kill team as we speak." That's cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to you eventually using them as well. Torch says, "Foam," and talking about carrying models. Foam for models without spiky bits, magnets for the pokey models. I don't know, because there's a company called Table War and a couple others, but Table War is the biggest one that I can think of, where they make these big cases that have shelves that go inside, and the shelves are metal, and then you just, rather than putting the models into foam cups in foam trays, you put real powerful magnets on the base of your models, and then you just attach them to these trays, so they're basically just sitting there in the tray, and they have nothing touching them, and that's cool. That being said, I wouldn't take it on a flight. Like carrying it down to your local shop and playing, awesome, great. But anything like you would never, and I'm pretty sure they tell you this on the Table War website, you wouldn't just check this at the airport. You know what I mean? Just like give them the case and go, here you go, knock yourself out, because they're going to throw it around. You've seen videos on YouTube of the baggage handlers chucking stuff around, and those magnets are powerful, but they're not so powerful that they're going to stand up to that. But if you're carrying your models to someplace and you've got, control of it most of the time, you should be better off. When you go to something like Adepticon, the people that bring their pieces to the Crystal Brush painting competition, the super high-end painting competition, nearly every single one of those painters brings their models in like a Table War type case where they're magnetized on the bottom and they're not touching anything on the inside of that case. And Table War even makes the cases where that front panel on it is clear plexi, so you can see the cool models inside and you carry them around. And I don't own one of those. But I always thought they were cool. Like you're taking like your fancy model in one of those, and that makes sense because you wouldn't want to necessarily, especially since with display models you usually don't use varnishes on them. Like you don't go back over with dull coat like you do with a model you're going to play on the tabletop. So yeah, that's you don't want it rubbing against the foam on your travels to Adepticon or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different options for that kind of stuff. So. What else have we got going on over here? Finrod says, I use Felderher inlays and stuff them into old boxes out of hard cardboard. I've heard of Felderher. I don't know that I know how to pronounce it properly, but I've heard of them. I mean, there's other foam companies out there besides Battle Foam. There's KR Multicase, there's Felder, there's Game Store or Game Something Plus. There's a bunch of different companies out there that do foam. And foam is probably one of the most popular ones for carrying your models around, especially gaming models. The Miniatures Paintbrush says, how does one get a moderator for live feeds? Is there a moderator temp agency? Not that I know of, no. Yes, and Moderator Matt has answered the question. You ask your friend Matt and buy him a beer when you see him. Or bourbon, whatever. That's good too. But yeah, there's not a there's someone should make a temp agency. That'd be like Uber or something, but for YouTube moderators. That's a $1 million idea for you right there. Manuel says, what's going on with the new scale of the Space Marines? It's a bit unfair for actual buyers. I guess I don't know as much about it as I thought. Some people have also talked about the new true scale Space Marines. I should go back and look now and see. Like, I have not seen new Space Marines. I've seen some of the trailer video for the new Death Guard, but they didn't really have a good sense of scale up against other stuff, but I'll have to take a look at it. If anything, I would bet that they're probably getting a little bigger, maybe, kind of like the Sigmarites for Age of Sigmar, the Stormcast Eternals. They're pretty beefy models. They're big, so maybe they're going down that direction. What else have we got here? Will the Force Organization thing... What will we don't know what the Force Organization stuff will be in 8th edition. If it's anything like Age of Sigmar, then it will be like... you'll have some battle lines, which are basically troops. You'll have some elites, and then you'll have like some vehicles or behemoths or whatever, monstrous creatures. I don't know. I have a suspicion they'll probably keep that a little bit more in line with what we're used to for Warhammer 40k, but we'll see how it goes. So, yeah. Death Corps of Krieg. Oh, well, that's great. Will this mean I will need to get a new rule book? I have got into 40k a week ago. Well, technically, you will get the rules will be free. You'll be able to download the core rules for 8th edition for free, so you won't have to buy a new rule book, technically. If you want to get a new rule book, because they'll also sell one, probably with more information, then yeah, probably so. If you just bought 7th edition like a couple weeks ago, yeah, really, honestly, if you bought it from a store, they should have said something and been like, well, maybe you want to wait. But I could see a store maybe not necessarily making that decision either. So, Danimation says, do you think we'll get Grand Alliance style books for our armies in 8th edition? I get the feeling that's probably the case. I think that they will do that. Now, here's the deal. With Age of Sigmar, they have the hardcover books that are for specific sub-factions, like one for Sylvaneth, one for Ironjaws, one for, Stormcast Eternals and stuff like that. But then they also have these thicker softcover books, like one that's just Death Grand Alliance. Here's the problem with the Death Grand Alliance book and probably the other big Grand Alliance books. They're inexpensive. I mean, they're thick. They're a good inch thick, and the one I bought was like $33, softcover. They're kind of useless. Like, they're basically just reprinting all the War Scrolls that were on the website. You know what I mean? So you could download all the stuff that's in that book for free. Now, if you just are one of those people who really wants a actual printed version, okay, well, that makes sense. Then that's why you pay the $33. But when I bought it, I did not realize that. I was fine with the PDFs because I can print those out if I really want to. So yeah, that was not necessarily to my liking. I didn't buy any more of those Grand Alliance books after that. The hardcover ones for the specific sub-factions, they come with battalion information that you can't get anywhere else, and they also come with some other faction-specific allegiance powers that you can only get in those books and no place else. So those I get. I understand why you would buy those, but the main big like Grand Alliance books like you had for Age of Sigmar, I don't think those are super useful. And so they may do stuff like that again for 40k. We don't know, as it turns out right now. But Adam, look on the 40k website in the painting section. There's a picture of big Marines. I'll have to check that out after the show, because I have not seen that yet. Yep. Stevie says, I want to get into Malifaux with my girlfriend. Any tips? I think Malifaux is probably one of the better games to get into with your girlfriend. And the reason I say that is because Malifaux is very popular with women, from what I've seen. And from what I've talked to people. But definitely when you go to Adepticon and because I was just there recently, when you go look at the tournaments, like the Malifaux tournaments, there are a much, much higher ratio of women playing in those tournaments than in any other game at that convention. You walk into the Saga room, not as many women. You walk into Infinity, there's a couple. You walk into the 40k room, like the giant 40k hall where they're doing like the big championship, almost none. But when you walk into the Malifaux room, there's a lot of women in there. And the reason for that, I think, is because all the Malifaux characters are just that. They're characters. They each have their own story. They're not just random trooper number 25. You know what I mean? There are a lot of women in the game. Like, there's a lot of women models in that game. So I think that helps women be more interested in the storyline and be more just engaged with the story. So yeah, I think it's a good game. As far as tips are concerned, I would just tell you to buy two crews, and then whether she and you both are going to build them and paint them, or you're going to build them and paint them because she's not so however you wanted to handle that. Work together on it. That's a big deal. I just did a video. Just came out a couple weeks ago, and it was an interview during Adepticon with Terry Latorco and her husband Nathan, and it was about them being a wargaming couple. Watch that because it talks a lot about how to get kind of how to go down that road. They had some really good stuff, and it turned out to be a really good video. So they had some good stuff to say. So definitely. Scathe Zombie says Shadow War Armageddon is 10 models or less, 20 for orcs. Yes. What's the other one? Gene Stealer Cults is 15. So yes, I'm kind of surprised that Imperial Guard is also only 10. I kind of thought Imperial Guard might go up to 15, but it doesn't. So, but the Gene Stealer Cults can go up to 15. Hobocop says, "Where do I get the rules?" Well, it depends on what rules you're talking about. Having a Grand Chaos army book would help me create a big fluff army. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I could see that. Thoughts on the current state of Privateer Press and War Machine? That's a good question. I don't know a ton about them as a company. I know that they kind of had that sort of issue recently with their press gangers, or press gangers are kind of their volunteers that help teach the game and things like that, and they've had to cut that program off. And it's not due to legal troubles currently. I think they're doing it partially due to potential legal troubles down the road. I did a video about it about a month and a half ago, so you might want to check that out. I know that they just had a 3rd edition came out last year that was supposed to help streamline the rules some and also balance the game a little bit better so that it is actually a little bit more about war machines. One of the reasons I stopped playing when I was playing a little bit with War Machine was because it was a game called War Machine, but the actual war jacks, the big war machines, were not super useful in the game, and it was more about lots and lots of models, troops. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't like any of the Hordes models. I just don't like the look of any of the Horde stuff. I do like the War Machine stuff, but I don't know a lot of people that play it around here, honestly. Down in the Milwaukee area, there's a big crowd that plays War Machine, but up here in the middle part of Wisconsin, there's not a lot of people to play it. So, the Nerd Zone asks, Adam, how do you attach a miniature to a flying stand base? I can't figure out how to do it with my High Warden from Spire of Dawn. Do you mean like what kind of glue do you use? Normally with a flying stand base, you want to use, I believe, plastic cement instead of CA glue, because CA glue, as it dries, will give off vapors that will cloud the clear plastic stand. If that's not the question you're asking, then I'm not sure what the question you're asking is. Just picked up my first set of miniature Space Wolves for the fluff, and oh, dang it. Let me scroll back up a little bit more here. For the fluff, and it looks like their fluff is about to change dramatically in the 8th edition trailer. Oh, so I guess I haven't looked at the 8th edition trailer. I'll have to check that out. I'm building Space Wolf Scouts for Shadow War Armageddon, and just because I've never done any Space Wolves before, and I was like, I wanted to build regular Scouts, but I was like, well, I don't know. But the other issue was that I really love plasma guns in Shadow War Armageddon, and you can't really take... You can take a plasma pistol, but you can't take a normal plasma gun in a normal scout force, because the gunners, the special guys, the gunners in scout force, you can only either take a missile launcher or a heavy bolter. But with the Space Wolf scouts, you can't... I don't think you can take... Well, maybe... No, you can still, I think, take a heavy bolter or a missile launcher, but you can also take a flamer, melta, or plasma gun. So I went that direction. So that's why I'm building them. Plus, like I said, I've never painted them before. I've never sculpted them before. I've bought some bits now that are extra, like wolf pelts and things like that I'm going to try to get on these guys and see how it works out. So, what else have we got here? Alexander asks, how do I get friends into wargaming? Because I have hardly any opponents. I live in rural England, so wargaming is about as socially unacceptable as can be. The way that I always tell people to do that is to look at a small skirmish game, look at something that doesn't have a lot of models, and then you pretty much need to build two forces. So a game like Mercs. Mercs is a science fiction game, and you can only have 5 guys per side. Malifaux, generally your crew is not more than maybe 8 figures. So you end up having to buy 2 and paint them and build them and all that stuff, which is still... in comparison to like playing a normal game of 40k is far fewer models. And then you just have to have a friend over and say, hey, you want to play this game? I'll teach you how to play it. And then you play it, and hopefully over time you find the right person or whatever, or you beat down their defenses enough until eventually they start getting interested and they start thinking about it, and they start looking at the, say, Malifaux website and going, these guys that we play, I want those guys. And then you go, oh, well, I can teach you how to paint them, and that kind of stuff. It's a big deal to help when you're trying to teach somebody who's new to the hobby and that kind of stuff. If you have them over to your house, or if you go over to their house and you both sit and paint at the same time, or sit and build at the same time, it allows them to ask questions. If you just dump a bunch of stuff on them and say, here you go, I'll see you next week, they're not going to be able to do it. Or they'll be very difficult to do it, or it will seem like a really big deal and a big hill to climb. But if you can, hobby with them, you're being social, you're also answering questions, you're showing them, hey, see, this is what I'm doing here, you see, this is how that works. They may have not even thought of that part yet, and so it's just a good idea to work together like that in those situations if you're trying to get a friend into the hobby, or if you're trying to get a spouse into the hobby as well. What have we got here? Hi, Uncle Adam. Any advice for speed painting competitions? Ruben, I took a class on speed painting a couple years ago at Adepticon, and the only thing I took away from it is that if you want to paint faster, you should move your brush faster. It was not a great class, as it turned out. I was not particularly... I've had some good classes, seminars at Adepticon. This past year, just a couple, last month, I had probably the best class I've ever taken from a guy from Massive Voodoo, or Rafael Piku? Something like that. Super good painter, super good sculptor. It was a class on converting and sculpting, and it was really good. He was super good. But I've taken some sort of stinker classes too, and the speed painting one did not leave me with good advice. So I don't have particularly good advice on speed painting. I've found that my painting has sped up as I've gotten better, or just as I've been doing it longer. I've been finding shortcuts and cheats to make it happen. But for a competition, yeah, I don't know that I would. I don't know how that would work out. And again, I'm not a super competitive guy, so. Isaac asks, "Is P3 paints good?" Yes, they seem to be good. I don't find it's hard to find them in where I live. Like nobody really carries them much right around where I live. So when I'm at another store, another city, or whatever, I have a tendency to pick some up. But they're generally pretty good paints. The pigments are finer. I know Sam likes them a lot. Sam uses not just P3 paints, but he uses a lot of P3 paints. So. What else have we got here? P3 paint is good. I use that Vallejo. I also use Vallejo as well. I'm a big fan. So yeah, definitely. What else have we got here? Chris asks, will you be venturing into Dawn of War 3? That's a good question. I played Dawn of War 1 back in the day. I played a little bit of Dawn of War 2. I didn't like it as much. I kind of thought I would at first because it seemed a lot more squad-based, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It just didn't strike me as much. And I don't really play a lot of computer games anymore, or even I play on PlayStation once in a while. Sometimes at night, just before going to bed, I'll play on, for a while. But I don't play that much these days. So I don't know. That's a good question. It does look amazing. The stuff that I've seen, I know they've been playing a lot of. I've been watching a lot of it on YouTube, like the beta stuff and things like that. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. I'm not sure. Frankly, I'm not 100% sure that this machine would be able to handle it. That's also kind of a concern. I will certainly. I can tell you right now, I would almost absolutely not upgrade my computer to play that video game or any video game right now. Frankly, but we'll see. Yeah, definitely. It does look awesome, though. I love the fact that they're bringing in the Imperial Knights. What else have we got here? My local GW recently introduced Army of the Month competitions. 1 month to paint your figs. You can win a spot in the display window for your army for the next month. Oh, that's kind of cool. See, it's nice that some of these shops, even GW shops, but even whether it's a GW shop or just a local independent shop, doing things like that, making contests like that, doing kind of things like that, I think that's a good thing, and it really helps the hobby. It really helps them also with their sales. But the reason I think a lot of shops don't do it is just because they have so many other things that they also have to be doing at the same time that frequently it's more of an issue of time. So sometimes shops like that will see if they can get somebody who's really passionate about the hobby and get them sort of spearhead that. And maybe go, hey, if you do this competition and run it and all this stuff, I'll give you some discount or something like that. You'll see some shops do that kind of thing, but it depends. So yeah. Where can I find stuff that you have finished painted? Some of my stuff you can find on Instagram. So if you go to instagram.com/Tabletop Minions, or if you just go into your Instagram app and search for Tabletop Minions, you can do that. Otherwise, some of the stuff is on Facebook. I do need to shoot a lot more photos. I have a lot of stuff done that I just realized, like really just recently, within the last week, that I just don't have a lot of photos of a lot of my finished stuff. Not good ones, at least. So I picked up at Adepticon, I picked up this thing from Table War. I was talking about Table War before. Those are the guys that make the cases with the magnets. They also make neoprene mats that you would play games on. You've seen those printed mats and all that stuff. They're also now starting to make these things called macro mats, which are like a very small mat. It's maybe 2 foot wide by maybe 3 or 4 feet long, and it's designed it's printed on it to look like a backdrop, like a white to blue fade, or like a dark kind of cloudy sort of color or whatever. And then it comes with like this little sort of rack, and then I'm not able to show you very well here, but basically it's a thing that you can clip this background to it and then set your model down in there, and now you have this nice kind of gradient kind of going up in the background, kind of like this. So the model's here. Hang on, I have a model here. All right, so you're going to take a picture of this model, but going up is this gradient back here, and then you can get a nice shot. You just have to set up some lights and things like that. I picked one of those up at Adepticon, and I need to set that up down in the basement and just do a lot of shooting, over the course of an afternoon or whatever, so that I can show you guys some of that stuff. And I need to put a lot of the stuff into the Facebook, the Paint Showcase Club. I did that model for Giant Killer Robots, that Kickstarter from Weta Workshop. I did that model, and I need to put some good pictures of that onto the Facebook, because I've told people I was going to do it. I just haven't had the time. So that's probably where you'll start to see some of that stuff once I get that rolling. I may even do it this afternoon. We'll see. I also have a lot of terrain to build, so we'll see how that goes, but it'll eventually happen. What else have we got here? What do you consider the better lazy paint style? Base coat and dip, or prime white and wash? I would say there's a third way, which is not as lazy as prime white and wash. What it is it's prime it black, and then spray it with white primer from above. Whether you use an airbrush, whether you use a rattle can, whatever, you spray it from above. So now you have this gradient that goes from white to black on your model, and it looks like it's being lit from above, okay? Then you go back with glazes, washes, whatever, and do colors and stuff like that. Can also be called underpainting. I did a video a long time ago, 3 years ago, called Understanding Underpainting. So if you go find that video, it explains in there how to do it. I do that a lot. I don't do it for everything, but I do that a lot, where I prime black, then prime white from above, so that you get that nice gradient, and then you just kind of color over it with these transparent kind of glazes, and it works out really well. That's a quick and easy way, especially for like Malifaux, where like everybody in the group they're not all wearing the same uniform. You know, like if you're painting Space Marines, doing it this way is a little bit harder. But if you're painting, you know, like models that, like, this person's, you know, dressed in red, and this person's in brown, and this person's in blue, or whatever, and that kind of stuff, and different things, then it works really well that way, and it can allow you to kind of go through quickly. You just need a bunch of washes and glazes to, you know, at your disposal. So yeah, I'm gonna do a video soonish. I've got an idea banging around in my head. I want to do a video, possibly a live stream, where I start off showing a pre-recorded video of how I did some rattle can tricks out in the driveway on these models. And I would talk over the video as it was happening. I would be sitting there live streaming saying, okay, well, then I did this, and then I did this. This was this color I used, whatever, spray, spray, spray. That video gets done, and cuts back to me now with the finished models that have been allowed to dry. And then I would just be able to sit there and actually paint and just show you, you know, in real time how I quickly go through and try to paint stuff when I'm trying to speed paint. It may be a 2-hour video. It may be a 3-hour video. I don't know. But it's something I'm kicking around the idea. It'll be harder for me to paint and also answer questions, so I don't know how much of that'll go on. So I may not even have the chat turned on, sadly. I'm not sure. I haven't quite figured that part of it out. It's technical details at this point. I'm obviously not going to do it up here in the dining room either. I need to do it once I move my stuff downstairs more. But it's a plan that I'm thinking about, and I'm not 100% sure if people will be super interested, but I might give it a try and, you know, see what happens. Run it up the flagpole, as they say. I appreciate the pachows, guys. I can't really do a pachow here like that because it won't actually appear up here. I mean, I guess I could later on, I suppose, like after this is done, go back through, but I'd have to find the right time and where it happened, and I generally don't go back and completely rewatch these 2-hour shows because it would take a lot longer for me in general. Brian Griffith is right. Adam does not have pachow powers when he live streams. It's true. It's technically true. However, I do have the lovely and talented moderator Matt, who does frequently put in links into the chat, and you guys have been seeing that. Matt is the pachow. I need to make him a shirt that just says, you know, this is the pachow, or something like that. But yeah, definitely. Joshua Pearson says zenithal highlighting. That's what I was talking about before with the concept of priming black and then spraying from above. It really helps. Some people just use it as an indicator, so when they're painting over it with regular paint, they can see where the break would happen if the light was coming from above. I'm lazier than that, so instead of doing that, I just paint glazes over the top of it. It's like taking a black and white photo, okay? And you've got this black and white photo, and you take like a color filter, and you put it over it, and now everything's red and black instead of black and white. Same kind of deal, except that you can do it in each different section. If you took a black and white photo, and then you put some red plastic and cut it out around this part, and blue plastic and cut it around this part, you could kind of colorize the photo, you know, over time if you did it that way. This is the same type of deal. You're basically making a black and white miniature, and then you're adding color filters over every section. You know, you put blue on the pants, now he's wearing blue jeans, but it looks like you blended light blue on the tops of his legs and then dark blue as it started to fade in, which you didn't actually do. You just sprayed it and then you just colored it all blue, but it was a transparent blue, so the fade came through. I'm hoping I'm making this understandable. All right, anyway, one last question. Sam asks, what's the difference between Kill Team and Armageddon? Kill Team was designed to work with the 7th edition rules, and Armageddon is its own rule set. So if you're interested in buying one, well, right now, I don't know that you can get the Kill Team box, but I think you can still get the Kill Team rules online as a digital download. If you were interested in getting into one of them right now, I would probably tell you to get into Shadow War if you can. That's probably the best way to go. But yeah, Shadow War, self-contained, and Kill Team works with the current 7th edition rules. When 8th edition rules come out, I'm sure they'll just tweak Kill Team a little bit and then be able to make it like that. Kill Team's also like a 400-point army for 40k, and that's kind of the way it works. So anyway, there we go. That's another Sunday, and I appreciate everybody who came out. The numbers, I have to admit, the numbers are humongous this week. I'm just looking right now. There was just 720 people watching, and I happened to glance over before, and I saw up over 800. Normally, I have, if I get 400 concurrent, or maybe even 450, I'm thinking, wow, that's a pretty good day. So this was a pretty good day. That was really well done, and so I appreciate everybody coming to watch and to ask questions and wait patiently, and hopefully I can answer some of them and everything. I have been super glad that Matt's here to help do some moderating, because there's evidently been, as you get more people online, you get a little bit more shenanigans. So I appreciate Matt doing that. You definitely need to go and check out RecAge. Go do a Google search for RecAge. If Matt wants to put in a little link there, I think it's rec-age.net. I'm not sure. Anyway, definitely. So again, we'll see you in 2 weeks at this Every Other Sunday show. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone for watching, and have a good rest of your day. Oops, I hit my coffee. Sorry.